Welcome, foolish creatures, to another episode from Fright Chasers. You'll hear spooky calls from our haunted hotline, stories plucked from another dimension with tales from the beyond, oddities galore in news from the beyond, and haunting interviews with your ghost host, Woody G. Watts. Welcome to the Fright Chasers.
This is your host, Woody G. Watts, with another episode of Fright Chasers and some more news from the beyond for this week. The last week. Wait, no, it's the first week of August. Oh my gosh. Where did July go, everybody? August is upon us. This episode might get released a little bit earlier than the typical Thursday news from the beyond, but then again, I may wait. It's just so much news going on that I have a hard time waiting and adjusting to a release schedule. So I apologize if this podcast is all over the place, but usually once something hits my brain and it is recorded, I got to get it out. So with that said, recently, I was on a local talk radio station here in town, here in Central Virginia, WLNI, a talk radio station. And they asked me to be on to talk about another podcast that I have been working on for quite some time. You heard me talk a little bit about that one in the last episode of our News from the Beyond segment. And it's Bigfoot Classified. That podcast, I had been thinking about doing it for a while regarding conspiracy theories revolving just around Bigfoot, because as you may know, if you've heard any of the podcast in the past or seen anything I post on social media, I am Team Bigfoot all the way. In fact, I probably talk about him a little too much around here. So this podcast, I wanted to approach in a documentary format, and WLNI saw that had surfaced in the Apple charts, the podcasting charts, and asked me to be on, and I got a chance to talk about it a little bit, which was very exciting in a fun documentary way, and talk about some of the other podcasts, true crime and all that good stuff. So what I wanted to do today is lead off News from the Beyond with that particular interview, because what I'd like for you to do is, I would love, if you're a listener to this podcast, I would love for you, if you're interested, to go to bigfootclassified.com. Go subscribe to that podcast and listen to it. And I will probably touch on those stories. There's several that I'm working on, but I will probably touch on those in this podcast at some point, but maybe not as in depth. But I do want to talk about them because they really interest me. And I would love to kind of go a little different route with them on this podcast, like dive a little bit deeper, talk about it a little bit more instead of just kind of telling the story. Because this Fright Chasers is really my personality, and I don't want to overly produce it. I want you to know how I feel and kind of talk with everybody about those theories. So here is the interview with WLNI regarding Bigfoot Classified. And after Bigfoot Classified, keep listening, come back, because we're going to talk News from the Beyond and some other conspiracy theories that have surfaced this week that made me think, hey, let's talk about Bigfoot Classified, and then segue right into it. So here's your perfect segue.
And it is here, Bigfoot Classified, brought to you by Watts Creative Studio, and joining us, the Watts of Watts Creative Studio, Woody Watts. Hi, Woody.
Hello. I said if they're all real. What was I thinking? Like every story was real.
And oh wow, this is really cool. It's getting a lot of attention. Your new podcast called Bigfoot Classified. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so tell us about this latest podcast. How did it come about?
All right, so I have always been interested in Bigfoot. Okay. For as long as I can remember. It's just fun getting out in the woods. It's fun just having fun out there searching for Bigfoot is like just the best part of it, right? And I had this idea probably two years ago when I started looking up like cover-ups. I love conspiracy theories. I love going down rabbit holes. So I started digging into, well, what are some Bigfoot cover-ups that I haven't heard about? And the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980 was supposedly one of the biggest Bigfoot cover-ups ever. And I'd been kind of researching, had a folder on my desktop, just kind of putting documents in there. And about 6 months ago, I said, I'm going to finally do this this series, because I had, been doing some true crime series and love doing that. But Bigfoot's my passion, I hate to say, but it makes you sound crazy. But yeah, so I've been researching it and found so many interesting accounts and stories and just a history of this eruption leading to a supposed government cover-up of Bigfoot bodies that were, on the mountain when it erupted. And that's the story that has been covered so far in 3 parts. Now I'm already working on another cover-up, and I've got it's another rabbit hole.
So the idea is there's not just one Bigfoot. There are many Bigfoot.
Yes.
Big feet.
How do you say it?
Bigfoots.
Yeah, we'll say Bigfoots. Yes, actually, there are several. It depends on what part of the country you live in.
Right.
Actually, what people call it. Like, actually, my hat, some people in southwestern Virginia call it a wood booger because it's the boogeyman of the woods. So
I like wood booger.
Wood booger, right? So it just
you would like wood booger.
And so different parts of the country, but in Virginia, supposedly there have been, at least in the last couple of years, 85, and I'll quote, confirmed sightings, okay, by people that have been backed up and eyewitness accounts. So 85 in Virginia alone. So it's pretty impressive. At least the last couple of years.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wood booger. What are are there other names?
Well, and if you get into the snow regions, sometimes it bleeds over to Yeti.
Yes.
So there's just different folklore, but they all kind of have the same traits. They're tall, hairy, and
they're
elusive.
Not like just tall, hairy, fat guys walking around naked. Right?
Well, that happens too sometimes.
Elusive. Elusive. That's the fun in it, the mystery. Because what is it? All these 85 confirmed sightings. What are these people seeing?
Well, for example, you brought up earlier Finding Bigfoot, the show
right.
Finding Bigfoot. So with that one, there's actual footage. Now, whether or not you believe it, that's I'm a huge skeptic myself. But there was this guy riding an ATV. I think it was in Shenandoah Valley. They don't give the actual location because they don't want crazies like me going out in the woods out in their backyard. He was going up a creek, and have pretty clear footage of just a tall, ape-like. The definition is an ape-like humanoid character, and it walks across the water. It's there. So it's whether or not you believe it. That's up to you. But there are just so many interesting stories, and the wood booger one is I'll have to cover that in the podcast too, because wood booger there's quite a few where they actually, this is probably really too early to talk about this, but they some have kidnapped children. Okay. And so it turns into this it's like I said, it's rabbit holes. Like it could be a horror, it can be, but there are very, very, very few reports of any injuries that we know of. But there is also a theory in this podcast, Bigfoot Classified. I think the second part we talk about a theory called Missing 411, where some of the national park disappearances were caused by Sasquatch.
Because we have had those.
We've had quite a few.
Your podcast is Bigfoot Classified, and I see that it's ranked number 81 in the Apple documentary podcast charts. It might even be higher now at this point.
I checked this morning; it's in the 50s.
Wow.
It keeps fluctuating, so it's the charts are very flattering, and I know that it's fun when your podcast gets in the charts, because then I start getting emails, and that's the fun part. So I'm already starting to get emails about information, people listening to it, connecting me with other cryptozoologists and all that good stuff. So it's a fun project. And really with Bigfoot Classified, I've been doing true crime because that really interests me, and it was kind of a personal mission to keep these cases alive, the cold cases. And I wanted to approach the Bigfoot subject in the same way, because that was really lacking in what I feel like in the podcast arena is a very serious kind of like, well, let's look at it. A conspiracy theory that wasn't hoaxy or like commercial break where, what happened to him, really right. Kind of address it and get the kind of string everything together. So
let me ask you, are you familiar with the former Congressman Denver Riggleman?
Yes.
Do you plan to have him on at least one episode to discuss Bigfoot erotica and his book on Bigfoot?
That'll be a different podcast.
The R-rated podcast.
Yes, that'll be the After 11 show. But you know what? I love that's part of the fun with Bigfoot is talking with people and really getting these crazy stories. I mean, like really, like my firsthand experience with Bigfoot a couple of years ago. My wife and I went to Littleton, North Carolina, which is there's nothing there except for the state park and the forest. And we went to go to this cryptozoologist museum, and it was in this guy's house. He had the whole lower level of his house was this museum that he decked out. And I'd never met him before. So my wife and I go down one Friday. I'm like, hey, let's go for a ride. And she's like, where? I was like, I don't want to tell you.
So that's
let's
a
go.
good sign.
But then we get there, and this guy I've never met, we start talking and just start interacting. And then he's like, I tell you what, I'll shut the museum down, and let's go hiking in the forest and see if we see any signs. And so I'm following this guy who I've never met into the state park on a 2-hour hike. And we end up seeing what we think are footprints, right? So like I'm hooked then, but then it kind of hits you like we're in this forest with this guy we don't know.
Not really sure.
And
like,
you
we're
just
like-
happen to be out here.
We're
Yeah.
hours away from anybody else. But that's fun. And talking to him, like meeting him and finding out like he's really good friends with Billy Joel. And just it's such an interesting world, and it's just fun being out in the woods. So
What goes into producing your podcast, Woody?
a lot of research, a lot of research. And I think that's the thing that, most podcast people that podcast, they're not backed by a studio. They're independent. They're doing it in their kitchens. They're doing it in their dens. And, it took me probably 2 months to really gather all the information. And then it takes me 2 to 3 weeks to really settle on an episode after I edit it and listen to it and kind of tweak it. And if you have interviews, that's a whole nother level. So it's a lot of work. And this one, especially with this one and true crime and cold cases, you want to get the research right because people like podcasting is a very intimate form of information, and they're engaging with you, and they, what you're saying, like people really sit on this and they get on the forums. And so whatever information I put out, I really try to be accurate. So that's especially with this, you're already going to have people making fun of you anyway because it's Bigfoot. But at least I want the information right so that I can go and say, well, here's my sources. Here you go.
Wes would like to know if you've ever found any Bigfoot poop.
I personally haven't, but Steve, he had a display in the museum of it. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it was in the display case.
So a little more about the first 3 episodes are the Mount St. Helens
Yes.
conspiracy theory.
Yep.
It hadn't really occurred to me that there would be Bigfoot on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I always
yeah.
think of them as being
Trackless
I
forests
guess
in
I'm
the
a little
Northwest.
selfish that way. I think of them as being closer.
Did you
but
watch the $6 Million Man?
Well, the interesting Mount St. Helens. All right, so the eruption happened in 1980. There were stories about and we cover it in the first part. In 1924, some of the locations around Mount St. Helens actually got renamed because of the Bigfoot stories that happened, like Ape Canyon. There was a couple of miners that went there, and they were in a cabin, and they started hearing rocks being thrown at the cabin, and then they started seeing these 3 to 5 creatures stalking them. So there's this whole backstory around Mount St. Helens that is really interesting. And then you hear the eruption, and then it just kind of all comes together in the 3rd episode.
Biscuit, you've listened, right?
I've listened to all 3
Okay.
episodes so far. Because when we started talking about this, I was like, well, I've got to find out, and I listened to the first episode.
Oh, that's so fun to hear. I'm so glad.
And Anthony is a Bigfoot fan.
A believer?
I believe
A believer.
all of it's real. I believe Bigfoot's real, aliens are real, ghosts are real, all of it's real.
I like Anthony. There you go.
So what's next, Woody, as
Well,
far as the Bigfoot
The
Classified?
Bigfoot Classified. The next cover up that we'll cover is Battle Mountain, Nevada. There was a fire in 1999 where there have been 20 to 30 witnesses that actually saw a Bigfoot that caught fire in this complex, and it needed help, it needed aid, but no one has. I mean, there's written statements. There's this whole cover up because it was at a complex, and there's some other couple of like single stories that I'm looking to cover, and I'm going to interview a couple of professionals that have listened to this podcast, and I want their input. Right. So again, I'm down the rabbit hole now, so I'm hooked on it, and Mount St. Helens, I'm hoping to get out there because I want to see it. I want to go to Ape Canyon. I want to go to where they had the cabin. So I am, but I always love a good Bigfoot story. And I may start incorporating that later on. If anyone has a story where they call in and leave me a message or we actually interview, I would love just Bigfoot stories because there's quite a few in Virginia that I could locally cover, which would be amazing.
We're speaking with Woody Watts, Watts Creative Studio. His latest podcast is Bigfoot Classified, but then you have the others too, true crime.
Yes. Why So Cold is a true crime series that I started 2 years ago, and that's a weekly podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we cover local cold cases. So it's, Central Virginia, North Carolina. They're cases that are lesser known, like some cases are fairly large, like the Route 29 Stalker or Colonial Parkway Killers. Stuff like that, has been covered and should stay out there. But the cases that I tend to cover, the ones that really kind of pop up on the headline for a day and then disappear. And then you see a report 5 years later that the family's still looking. And then 10 years later, the family's still looking. And it just breaks your heart. And so that one is more labor of love. But we have a really dedicated subscriber base to that always sends me cases that, hey, you may have, not heard of this one. And they will connect the dots for me. People will listen and say, hey, this one supposedly is connected to this. So that one, true crime, is kind of that. Just I don't know. I've got a microphone in my house. It's like one way I could give back in a way, just to kind of help keep cases alive. But then that one, true crime, I really wanted to do a Bigfoot one in that style. So then that led me to that. So, but yeah, Why So Cold is out. We release one every Tuesday, I believe. We have a couple seasons now, and 90% of the cases are here, like Lynchburg, Central Virginia. So people may recognize the names and the stories.
Yeah, true crime is a huge genre for podcasts.
But it's great that you're doing that because you want to be, obviously not only entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
People have a lot of ways to spend their time. And so if they're going to choose to hear podcasts, they're going to be entertained, but also information and that you're taking it seriously, that it's accurate information and not just the the exploitive headlines or
keeping it like a cliffhanger every for these, especially for Why So Cold, that one, I even set up discussion boards online where people can submit things, but at the end of every episode, I always give the information for people to submit a tip to the proper authorities, because talking with law enforcement officers, some of these cases can be solved with one tip. They're 3 out of the 3 out of the cases right now can be solved with just the right tip coming in. I've talked to the people associated with it. And so it's, it's one of those things where it's like, if you just keep it out there and somebody listens and thinks, now's my time to talk. Now I need to actually tell them what I saw that day. And that's how the crimes are solved. So it's the least I could do with the talents I have been blessed with.
BigfootClassified.com. For people who are unfamiliar to the whole podcast world, is that the best thing to tell them?
Yes, if you don't know what is a podcast,
yeah.
go to the website and I actually have the episodes right there on the homepage you can play. But if you are familiar with podcasting, go to the store, Bigfoot Classified.
Anywhere you find your podcast.
Anywhere you find it, yep.
Right.
So or you Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere.
Yep.
Or you
everywhere.
can, if you're asking what is a podcast, then the best thing to do is go to BigfootClassified.com.
Exactly.
Woody Watts, Watts Creative Studio. Keep up the great work with your video production and your podcast and everything you're doing. And we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thank you for having me. Again, that was the interview on WLNI. Give them credit for giving me that audio. Thank you very much. And I had a great time talking to Mary and Brian about Bigfoot, having some fun on a Friday morning in their studio, talking to the area about conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So thank you for listening to that interview. And if that has piqued your interest whatsoever, visit Bigfoot Classified again to subscribe, listen to that, and then come on back to Fright Chasers, because I will talk about that soon, and maybe we can have some discussions about that and have a couple of guests back on. I know in the earlier episodes of this podcast, well, I think this is actually number 101 now, which is crazy. I know I had Ken Gerhardt on here way early in the podcast, and he was wonderful. I'm going to try to get him on again and get some other people to talk about what they think about the Bigfoot conspiracies, if they're true, etc., etc. Now, on to some news from the beyond, and it was coincidental. I read these two stories, And it really made me think, now's the time to kind of insert Bigfoot Classified interview into this, because they all kind of go hand in hand. So your news from the beyond. So the Mars rover, okay? This is beginning to be another conspiracy theory that I can't shake for some reason. Some of them I read, I'm like, whatever. Then other ones kind of linger around. So as old as the landings on Mars themselves, conspiracy theories surround NASA's rovers, images of Mars. NASA is being accused of misrepresenting photos of the Devon Island terrain as those taken by the rovers on Mars. Due to Devon's Island rocky terrain is in an ideal location for analog missions to plan for actual missions as part of NASA's Hot Mars project. A new hoax theory alleges NASA has gotten as close to Mars as Arctic Canada, according to reports online. The notion that Mars exists at all seems to be questionable by some of those weighing in on the issue. What do you think? Visit frightchasers.com, click on News from the Beyond, take a look. Let's talk about it on Facebook. I'm interested in this. This is a conspiracy theory that has me. Y'all know the conspiracy theories out there, and if you've listened to Bigfoot Classified, my thoughts on the government possibly covering up at least two that I've covered already: the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980, and then Battle Mountain in Nevada. I don't know. I could be swayed fairly quickly to think that this is covered up as well. So, in another piece, speaking of UFOs, Mars, and all the etc. In a piece of puzzling footage from England, a doctor shows the night sky over his home filled with strange UFOs. Local media reports said the strange sighting occurred this past Sunday evening as Dr. Muhammad Salama was taking his trash barrels to the curb in front of his house in Harborne. I'm not editing that out. I want y'all to know that I mess up all the time. On this particular occasion, the doctor caught sight of something beyond his wildest imagination. As a keen photographer, he often looks to the sky to see if there's something interesting. A UFO flew quickly in different directions over Harborne sky. I had never seen something like this before, the doctor said. In Salama's video, two orbs can briefly be seen floating close together before one departs the scene, after the doctor described them as two balls of light flying very rapidly in different directions. It is possible to see the remaining object in the sky moving erratically for some time after that. Previously, a skeptic of UFOs, the doctor now can't explain what he witnessed, as he's unable to explain what he saw. I don't think it was a plane, drone, laser, or star because of how fast it moved and the way it maneuvered in different directions, Salama said. It was truly bizarre and left me pretty baffled, being a man from a science background. Skeptics will likely suggest that orbs could have been lanterns or spotlights from an event nearby, which Salama's ground perspective might appear unearthly. With that in mind, what's your take on the footage? I have the video up on frightchasers.com, News from the Beyond, on today's kind of post. Take a look at the video. Again, all of these theories in today's episode, I'm telling you, can't be quick to discount them. But on one hand, this is Woody commentary here. So I am anxious to believe the orbs are UFOs. But then on the other hand, I won't believe that NASA was able to land a little remote control car on Mars. So I know it kind of is speaking out of both sides of my mouth. However, there's an interesting concept that I recently was scrolling through TikTok and got lost, and 4 hours later found this theory about parallel dimensions and how UFOs are not from other planets but other dimensions, and they're traveling through that. And maybe I'll dive into that maybe I'll dive into that later on a different episode. But that has me thinking on these conspiracy theories that we're not quite there yet, but that's not to say that other dimensions or universes are not there. So what do you think? Again, visit frightchasers.com, click on News from the Beyond, take a look at the photos, the videos, and go to Facebook. Like us, follow us, whatever the term is now on Facebook at Fright Chasers, and comment on the story. I would love to talk about this. I would love to see your theories. Email me at contact@frightchasers.com, and maybe you can be on the show. We'll chat about it a little bit. And on Instagram at fright.chasers. Follow us on there. This has been another episode of News from the Beyond, and thank you for listening.
Be sure to check out our website at frightchasers.com and call our haunted hotline at 701-HAUNTED. That's 701-428-6833. With your spooky tale, we're dying to hear it. Thank you for listening to the Fright Chasers.